and welcome everybody to the room they call the Mike Lazaridis Theatre of Ideas here at the Perimeter Institute in Waterloo, Ontario. We've been here, as we suggested, all week long, looking at the future of schools and learning. We have asked, what can be done to engage disaffected students? How much learning can be done without teachers? How do we best bring scientific literacy to the not-so-scientifically minded? And we've examined how the shift from books to screens in the classroom is changing our understanding of learning and knowledge. The Equinox Summit participants have spent the week thinking about these and other subjects, and now we bring you the conclusion of their deliberations and ask what's truly necessary and what is truly possible on the way to the classroom of the year 2030. So, to help us do that tonight, we welcome Michael Brooks. He is the curator of this year's Equinox Summit. Kourosh Hushmand. He is a past vice president for the Ontario Student Trustees Association. He's now a student at the University of Toronto's Trinity College because he couldn't get into Vic. Samuel Levin is here as well. He's the founder of the Independent Project at Monument Mountain Regional High School in Barrington, Massachusetts, now a student at Oxford University across the pond. Speaking of which, here's also Graham Brown Martin, the founder of the Education Design Labs, and Jennifer Corriero, who is the co-founder of Taking It Global. Audience, can we welcome our guests one more time here at the Lazaridis space. We do want to remind you, as we have every day so far this week, that if you were not able to be here with us in person, we certainly have ways for you to participate in our broadcast from wherever you're watching it, be it on television or on your computer screen. Go to the website, tvo.org/learning2030. You're seeing the tweets that are coming in right now because our producers are also hosting a live chat, not only on that site, but also on our regular site, theagenda.tvo.org. Use the hashtag Learning2030 or the hashtag EQX for Equinox, EQX13, and participate in our program. Okay, we're going to show a series of, first of all, welcome everybody. Great to have you alongside again. We're going to share with people various excerpts of your final communique and then discuss those as we go along. But we thought it might be best to set up our discussion tonight by showing a small snippet of some of the clips that you have been sharing with your audiences as well. So this is a clip from one of your so-called benchmark videos, courtesy of WGSI, to get us started. Sheldon, roll tape, please.
Education as we know it began with a priest passing knowledge to specially chosen initiates. Then from tutors to privileged pupils. Then from teachers to large classes in the factory model. As students, we have learned by rote, by copying from written texts, by instruction from authority. This form of education hasn't accommodated individual differences amongst learners. We have processed students in batches, which has created disparity and a barrier to higher scholastic achievement. We are in the midst of a huge experiment, and we don't yet know what works. Are tablets that much more engaging than chalkboards? Does being alone with an internet connection create a better learning experience than struggling through alongside your peers? Are massive online courses just creating bigger batches? It is vital that we answer these questions quickly and push global achievement as high as this age of new opportunities will allow.
Those are just some of the very good questions that they have been pondering, debating all week long here in Lazaridisville. And let's read a little snippet now of the Equinox Summit's final communique, and we'll start our discussion with this. By the year 2030, just knowing facts will have little value. Education will need to equip learners to think creatively, independently, rigorously, and collaboratively in full awareness of themselves and their social context. Michael, to you first. Usually when big change is called for, the question arises, we need big change because what we're doing today is so inadequate. What's so inadequate about the way things are today?
The problem is really the institution. It's not the people within it so much, but we're currently working, or teachers are currently working, I should say, passionate, caring teachers are working with strictures that really inhibit their ability to do their job properly. So you have things that were arranged for the 19th century, bells ringing to get factory workers trained to do the right thing. You have people organized in strict rows in the classroom. Things like that are actually, they're not necessary to education, and actually they're sort of getting in the way of preparing students to be ready for the 21st century. In the time that's coming up, by the time, certainly the 2030 graduates are coming out of high school, they'll be wanting to be able to collaborate. They'll be wanting to have the skills of working together. I'm not sure at the end of my education I had any collaborative skills whatsoever. I was never kind of really encouraged to do any collaboration.
A smart aleck might say it hasn't held you back. You turned out okay.
I'm very good at getting away with things.
Okay. Graham, there's 134 million kids going to be born this year. They're going to go through a school system, and in 17 years, it'll be the year 2030, and they'll have, presumably for many of them, some kind of post-secondary system that they hope will meet the challenges and the needs that they will have at that time. Do we really have a system today? You've been studying this, discussing it with people from all over the world all week. Do we really have a system that is that antiquated to those needs?
I think it's about determining what our needs really are. I mean, when you design an education system, typically you have an economy in mind. I mean, you could get into a lot of nerdy detail about economic determinism, but just for the sake of conversation, let's go with that. And if you know that by 2030 you're going to have a particular kind of economy, then as a national plan, then you may have some idea of what kind of people, what kind of talent that you want in that to enable that economy to happen. So, for example, in the 1950s in the UK, it was quite acceptable to imagine that we would have people that would work in factories or people that would work in offices because we had manufacturing in the UK at that time. Now we don't. But yet we still have a system which is designed for that. So I think that it's the if you like, inadequacies, as you suggest, it's about really understanding where we're going, both as a nation, individual nations, but also as a species. So from a national perspective, it's where do you see your economy? Where is national well-being coming from? And then there are the bigger problems that face the planet. If we knew for definite that something catastrophic was going to happen by 2030 or 2050, such as we run out of water or we run out of food, maybe we might have a global initiative to ensure that we have the kinds of minds, a collaborative, creative, disruptively innovative minds who could solve those problems. It's sort of a moonshot type argument.
Kourosh, you are in what year of university now?
I'm in my first year.
First year. So high school is not a distant memory for you.
Not at all.
And you actually had a position of some responsibility when you were actually going to high school. You were part of a group of student trustees.
Yes, yeah.
And which is all leading to, if anybody ought to know something about how well high school is working or not, it should be you. So tell us.
Well, I hope it's me. I think part of it is that, take a look at who we're catering to. I think we focus on the people that are high performing, and we focus on the people that are underperforming. And I think we forget this marginalized middle, what I call, and students who are just average. And if you look at it, it's very strange because those are the majority of students. Now, how do you engage them? For me, that's the conversation that I like to have. And really, when you look at high school, there are some people who are engaged. There are some people who are disengaged. I think for the majority, it's the idea that they're not learning and gaining sense or gaining an ownership of ideas. And I think that's the most crucial element. They're just being told this stuff.
Let me push back a little on that, because one of the things that we heard earlier in the week is that high school's great for structuring things if you're so-called normal. But if you're really good or really underachieving and disengaged, it's actually not very good. I think you've just told us that you believe the opposite is true. How come?
I think so too. Well, partly it's because I think if we all had the answers to this, and if we can definitely say that people in the middle like the structure, I don't think that's the right parallel. I don't think average student, it means that you like structure. I think it means that you accept it. You don't push back, and you're not disengaged in one way. I think the idea there is that structure is easy. For anyone, structure is easy. Now you have two different levels of disengagement. One is because you're disengaged because the content's too easy. One's because it's too hard. Now the only reason that the people in the middle like the structure is because it's neither hard nor easy, so it's catering to that.
Gotcha.
So that's the issue.
Jennifer, let me get your take on this. Do you, after your week-long of deliberations here, come to the conclusion that our school system is essentially antiquated?
What I see is an emphasis on giving students more of a voice to create their structure for their learning. And one of the themes that came through this week was really the emphasis on designing interdisciplinary and collaborative projects where students can have a voice and a role in shaping what is it they want to learn and also how they might have an impact and improve society.
Some people will say, you're students. You don't know anything. Therefore, giving you a role in shaping that which you need to know doesn't make sense. You want to come back on that, Sam?
I'd love to.
Thought you might.
No, I think that's a completely understandable approach to think, your students, you don't know what you need, we do. But the problem is, it doesn't matter what you think we need. Everything shows, all the evidence shows that we're not going to learn it if we don't think we need it. It's pretty clear that if you're not engaged, if you're not excited about something, you're not going to learn it no matter what someone else thinks. So I think that's sort of missing the point about who knows what people need to know. What people think they need to know is what they're going to learn.
So we cannot threaten you or browbeat you or cajole you into learning what you don't want to learn anymore. Is that right?
Well, we've been trying to do that for a very long time, and clearly it's not working anymore. And I think another key point is not just the idea that students need to pursue their passions, because that's one of the things that's come out of this week, is that students need to pursue their passions, and you've heard that several times now. Mm-hmm. But another really key point that I don't want us to overlook is just this idea that one thing the school system is doing a great job at right now is teaching students facts. And that's been great for a long time, but it's no longer very useful.
Because they can get the facts on their own.
You can get the facts anywhere. What students need to learn now is how to synthesize those facts, how to appreciate them and distinguish between them, and how to take those and implement those facts, that knowledge, into real action. So those are some of the skills we want to teach.
One more excerpt from your final communique here that I want, Michael, I'll give you the first word on again. Control room, I'm on the top of page 5 here. We require, it says, a radically different structure for learning in 2030. One in which traditional concepts of classes, courses, timetables, and grades are replaced by more flexible, creative, and student-directed forms of learning. Michael, do you want to get rid of grades?
I have to ask you now, being British, do you mean the system of moving up in years?
I mean, you get an A in chemistry, you get a B in physics,
marks.
you get a...
Yeah.
You want to ditch that?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that at all. Steve, I was one of the really good students. I was good at exams. The system suited me really well. So you said, how come, you did all right, didn't hold you back. And it didn't hold me back, but I really question now, especially having had this discussion all week, how many of my peers it really held back, my classmates, the people who were with me, who maybe just weren't so good at learning stuff for exams, which was, really my forte. And so the idea that you would just have these people going through these systems and they get to the end of something, and in a couple of hours, they've got a couple of hours, a window of time, and they might be feeling ill for those couple of hours or something like that. And sometimes their whole future, or certainly the future, 5 years ahead of them, can depend on whether they can actually pull something out of the hat, pull something out of their brain that they might have actually studied up to 9 months ago. And it just seems a ridiculous way to assess whether somebody's learned something or not.
Just because it's in the final communique didn't mean you all agreed with it. So let me see a show of hands. How many people on this group today agree with getting rid of grades? Hands up.
If I may say...
Jennifer's hedging already. Go ahead.
No, I don't disagree. Yeah? I just want to emphasize that the idea is looking at a reevaluation of assessment and an emphasis on valuing a collection of experiences and focusing on skills and competencies. So the current assessment of how our system of exams and grades work is just not relevant, and that's what we're for.
Courage, I saw you did not put your hand up.
Yes, and the reason is because I want to bring about the notion that I don't think it's the grades being the problem, it's what the grades consist of and how are they brought forth. I think if you look at it, if my teacher was evaluating me, and we also have to make the distinction is what grades count for yourself and what grades count for I don't know, external opportunities. I like being assessed and knowing what I'm not good at and what I'm good at. But the means through which that's done, I think should be different. I think
You don't need to be told that you're an F at that. do you?
No, but I think I should be told where I'm at.
And especially when you can compare, then your friend says, "Well, I'm a C," and you get this kind of
But part of it
weird
is-
kind of
But also the issue
competitiveness.
here is we're talking about this in the context of secondary education and not university. And what this does, this idea of removing the examination, is it decouples the secondary school away from those assessments so that teachers in secondary schools can focus on the learning, focus on competence building, rather than gaming the system to get their kids through these tests. Because the problem at the moment with an existing testing regime is that teachers aren't rewarded for innovation, they're rewarded for getting kids through these standardized tests.
I totally
and it is
get that.
gaming the system.
I totally get that,
And,
but what do you...
and by removing that, there will, we're not talking about a world where we're not assessed. We're all assessed. I'm being assessed at the moment on your program. Does this guy know what he's talking about? We all make those assessments. And of course, the organizations that we talk about where you may need to be assessed, for example, if you wanted to go to a university, if they still exist in 2030, or to work for something, it's, we're offsetting that responsibility to those organizations.
Okay,
we
but-
need rounded, creative innovators out of our schools.
But Sam, yes, everybody's assessed all the time, but a grade point average or a letter grade is a great shorthand, some would argue, for an instant assessment of how good you are or aren't at something. If we're all being assessed, what are you going to replace that shorthand with?
So I think you would say that grades are a great shorthand, period. I wouldn't say that they're a great shorthand for actually showing anything very useful. And I think one of the great things about this communique is it's the result of a wide range of experts and experience, and we've incorporated a lot of research and new thinking, which suggests that actually that shorthand isn't very useful. Yes, we do need certain kinds of measurements and accreditations that can be used for people external to the system, by people external to the system. But what's come out of this process this past week is that it's a much more effective way to communicate useful things. So if I'm an employer, actually the grade won't really tell me much. But there can be things like portfolios, descriptions, and actually I can apply my own tests to the person I want to hire to see if they have learned the skills that I want. So I go to Oxford University, and actually, interestingly, the bulk of the process through which I got in didn't have to do with grades or exam scores. It had to do with a very, very rigorous interview process. So that's something that measures, it doesn't look at a number, it looks at the way I think and the way I've learned to think as a result of school.
Go ahead, Parash.
At Oxford or even Cambridge, if you don't have AP courses, you're instantly disadvantaged.
If you don't have what courses?
AP courses,
What's
so
that?
advanced placement courses.
Okay.
You can't get in. At Oxford, and this is from my experience, that they judge you based on a letter that you write and your marks.
Surely that's a problem with the universities,
Yeah.
isn't it?
So-
I mean,
so-
the universities have far too much power in this argument.
So-
I mean, the universities are simply an end-consumer business monetization model for education. And as soon as we spot that and realize that, maybe universities can be doing something useful, which is about a place where civil society goes to think, as opposed to this, we're going to charge you an awful lot of money and strap our students to a lifetime of debt just so they can be compliant citizens.
Jennifer.
One other strategy for assessment is not just having a teacher assess you, but for you to also assess yourself and to keep experiences as a benchmark. One practical project I can share that we're working on at Taking It Global is called Sprout, and it's an e-course that's project-based, and there's self-assessments on your skills, and there's also assets that you develop for a project at the end, a portfolio that launches something real. And so part of the assessment in the end is based on what you've learned as well as the feedback that you've received from the course facilitator. And another emphasis that we want to place for the role of the teacher is not necessarily one of the all-knowing and all-being sort of judge of someone's knowledge, but in fact the coach, the guide, the mentor, someone who can be a connector to create opportunities. And so there won't necessarily just be one score that ultimately defines the value or the knowledge or worth of a student, but in fact, multiple indicators, because we want to see students as whole people, and also to think about other indicators like happiness and health as outcomes from the school system.
Okay, but Michael, self-assessment. Come on, people cheat. Who's not going to give themselves a fantastic assessment?
Most kids won't.
They won't.
No, they don't have those kinds of devious skills to do that. So we all think of it like that. You know, we would think, well, I would just cheat and I'd get through the system. But if the system isn't loaded according to you know, whether you've got an A or an F, then actually they will assess themselves. They'll say, I'm not actually very good at, I'll give you my daughter as an example. She's 13 years old. Last year, she was in her second year of secondary education, and she was quite shy, and she didn't really feel comfortable speaking in class and putting her hand up in class. She didn't get a failing grade for that at all, but her teachers actually encouraged her to do that. They said, you know, they took her aside and said, Millie, you can speak up, and you know, some of the things you say are really clever, and you know, you should share that with the class.
In fact, we just had a tweet come up that said, if you get rid of this phony marking system, it will allow teachers to innovate. Do you think that's true?
Exactly. So my daughter this year has made a special effort, a conscious effort, partly because she was encouraged to by her teachers, and partly because she sort of saw it as a weakness of hers that she wanted to work on because it had been brought out. And she started to do it more this year, and she comes home and said, oh, Dad, I put my hand up twice in class today, and I said things, and you know, she says it's really incredible the difference it's made to her self-esteem. And suddenly she's got this, you know, this thing about her, and she's going to her drama classes and really sort of taking part in that, and she's coming out of herself. She didn't get a failing grade. She got an encouragement from a teacher to do something a bit outside her comfort zone.
Graham.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking on this business about assessment and peer assessment, I think actually more than self-assessment is more relevant. I mean, if we look at kids even today, and remember we're talking about 2030.
Right.
But today, you know, whether it's YouTube or GitHub, for example, which is where really cool programmers hang out, it's the response that you're getting from your peers about the work that you're doing. I mean, okay, you could argue that YouTube is just like you're getting lots and lots and lots of likes because you've got a roller skating cat. But you know, the principles are the same, the idea of reputation maps and trust maps. I mean, this is commonplace stuff that's happening today. So imagine what we might be doing with this technology in the future. I mean, we've heard a lot recently in the news about the data mining of the intelligence agencies on our emails and so on. Now imagine if we did something good with that data mining rather than spying on people, but actually using it to actually indicate what people are doing, what information they're learning. You know, we could profile things in much better ways for positive purposes rather than imagining whether someone's fiddling their tax return.
But you know, Sam, my hunch is students might go for this, students might go for this, teachers might go for this, parents are going to be the big stumbling block. They like marks because they want to know how little Johnny and little Janie are doing, and that's a great shorthand, they would say, to make it happen. How do you convince parents that this is okay to do?
I think you're right to some degree that might be a stumbling block. I think there are going to be a lot of stumbling blocks. What we've put together is a pretty bold statement about the future of education, so I'd be a little disappointed if there weren't some stumbling blocks. That said, I think you'll find that actually most parents don't feel like they get much from those grades. Again, that finding out that their son or daughter got a B or a 97 or whatever it is, or a 3, whatever grading system you have, doesn't tell them that much. And actually, an assessment from their own kid, an assessment from the mentor that's been working for them, a written kind of, and I'm talking about sort of written assessments or feedback things, that will tell them a lot more about where their son or daughter is than a number or a score.
Okay, next excerpt from your communique. Bottom of page 5, please, Sheldon. Here we go. Learning focuses on the development of lifelong learning practices and a sense of self, rather than facts and figures. Learners have a well-rounded base of knowledge and a core set of skills while establishing a depth of expertise in areas of interest that are framed by fundamental habits of mind. Michael, I thought we're here in one of the most prestigious institutions in the world for theoretical physics, where I think facts and figures matter a lot. And you guys are basically saying, easy with the facts and figures.
Everybody likes a fact, but they're not necessarily useful. And they're certainly not a skill. A fact is not a skill. And so you can take a fact into the workplace. If you turn up in an interview and tell somebody a fact, that's not going to particularly impress them. That's going to show you've got maybe a good memory. But if you can turn up with a skill, that's a very different thing. If you can demonstrate a skill, you can demonstrate the ability to interview well. You know, that you're a personable person, that you get on well with people, you interact well. You know, many jobs you'll go to now, and the interview and the selection process involves performing a task. You know, whether that's presenting or interacting with your fellow interviewees, and they're watching for these skills. And nobody's asking you, you know, what year the Battle of Hastings was.
1066.
Very good.
I think you need to know that stuff, though, don't you?
I think it's important that you mention where we are, because actually here at this amazing Institute of Theoretical Physics, the people who are here aren't the people who know the most, they're the best thinkers. So what we have in there is replacing facts and figures with these habits of mind. So we're not just saying, you know, don't teach people anything. We're saying teach them habits of mind, and that's what people at these amazing institutions have, you know, in abundance, which are being able to think critically, being able to be visionaries. You know, these are the things that we're trying to instill because they're much more important, especially at a place like this, than facts and figures.
Kourosh, you signing on to this de-emphasizing of facts and figures?
Sure. Just show me where to sign, though. I think so. I'm not too confident in that, or actually anything I say about education, especially Learning 2030. I hope we can't imagine what education in 2030 is going to be like, because if we can imagine now and we're looking at it from our frame right now, then it's probably not going to be too progressive once we reach 2030. So I think, you know, right now, sure, you know, I'd sign off with the idea that, you know, in how many years, 17 years, we should, you know, look at the skill base. Yeah, that's what I would say.
That's what you would say.
Yeah, probably.
Jennifer, you want to add to that?
I really like the emphasis on the habits of mind, and some of those habits being around recognizing context, local or global, looking at the motivation, the intrinsic motivation people have to learn. Because if the ultimate result are learners that are lifelong, people who recognize that we are living in a world that is constantly changing, and we know that the speed of change just keeps increasing, so I'm sure it'll be even faster in 2030. So I really like that emphasis on the habits.
But I think if you leave education, whether at university or secondary, with the skill of how to learn. I mean, when you go through this existing system, you're not being taught how to learn. You're being taught how to remember and how to regurgitate, as we've heard many of the panels say.
That's an important distinction, isn't it?
But to have the skill to know how to learn, and that to be a habit, I think that's the future. I mean, because we are facing an uncertain future. So we may have to relearn many times over. It's not like it was in my parents' generation where you had one career for life and, you know, the white picket fence and everything else. A lot of things are going to change. So I think that's a very important skill.
Okay, we're a little over halfway through, so let me just have you pause for a second. We're going to do some business with the folks watching us at home. A reminder, we are live at the Perimeter Institute in Waterloo, Ontario. If you haven't been able to join us in person down here in Lazaridesville, we certainly remind you that you are welcome to participate in tonight's discussion. We are live streaming the program on our special website, tvo.org/learning2030. You can join in as you're looking right now at those who have via Twitter. We've got hashtag learning2030 or hashtag EQX for the Equinox Summit, EQX13. So join in those various ways and participate in our discussion as well. Okay, long live failure. The communique, if I read it correctly, seems to embrace failure. Sam, why?
So yeah, that's been a key part of this discussion the whole time, is that's one thing our education system is missing. As Graham just pointed out, we're going to be facing such a complex world in 2030 with so many huge problems on a global scale, problems that cover all these different disciplines. And one thing that we don't want is kids going into the world with some really great skills and some great knowledge, and then the first time they get knocked down by a tricky problem, not be able to get back up. I mean, that's going to be one of the key skills that we want our graduates of 2030 to have.
Which is what? Resiliency?
Resiliency, to be prepared to know how to fail, to know that it's part of the process, to be ready to fail and then get back up. So we put a big emphasis on the value of not failure on its own, but being prepared for failure. We've talked about being able to fail intelligently.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
There's a lot also that happens to your body when you are afraid. You get tense, you get stiff, you can't move. And so there's a lot that can be learned just by how you view failure if you are not afraid of what the negative consequences might be. And if you are more curious to know what you can learn from it, then you will be greater off and you will be able to contribute more.
I think if you're not failing, then you're doing something wrong.
If you're not failing, you're doing something
Absolutely,
wrong.
absolutely. If you're not failing, that means you're not taking up challenges that truly challenge you.
What if you're just really good at it? You're not failing because you're good at it. You're doing well.
If you have someone that's good at everything, then I'd like to meet them because I don't think that'll ever happen. But at the same time, I think we should consider that it's not failure that we should be encouraging. I think it's failure that we should be accepting. Because you don't want a culture ultimately where people are unmotivated to succeed because all the time they think, okay, well, it's okay, I'm failing. I think we should create a friendly culture to failure, but we have to be very careful with what we do because there's a distinction between motivation to succeed and motivation not to.
Sure,
right?
great.
The late Malcolm McLaren, the manager of the Sex Pistols, for those who are old enough to remember, he had a saying which was, it's better to be a flamboyant failure than a benign success. And I tend to agree with that, really. If you're going to fail was Having said that, I think that what tends to happen in these discussions is that we tend to lurch too far in one direction. And so I think, as was said, I think it's not necessarily about promoting failure, but it's also recognizing that failure is part of innovation. I mean, you can't really, if you're not failing when you're innovating enough. And I think there's a point. But I think if we get to the point where we make it too safe to fail, too comfortable to fail, we miss some of the big lessons. I mean, the biggest lessons that you get in life are from failure. And sometimes failure hurts. It's painful. And so, and a lot of the things that you were saying earlier about feeling stressful and so on, that is part of it, and that's where you get some resilience from. So I think we have to tread carefully, because if we don't celebrate and embrace success, and we make failing safe, we end up with mediocrity. So I think there is a middle ground here, but we shouldn't frighten people not to try.
Let me follow up with you on that, Michael, because you are in a country right now which famously is risk averse. It's one of the reasons our banks went through the Great Recession pretty well, because they didn't get involved in a lot of these cockamamie schemes. Having said that, we have not a great venture capital community, unlike, say, south of the border. And I want to get a better sense about what you think it would require, because I think it would take a lot, to get people to change their mindset so that failure wasn't seen as something to be avoided at all costs, but rather just a step along the way.
Absolutely. I think this is a really important point, because you've got parents here looking at it saying, actually, I don't want my kids to fail. That's not a good thing. And it's a cultural value, really. Your reaction to failure. And in many countries, it's not a good thing to fail. But what we need to teach that it's a good thing to get back up and try again and try something different. And that's kind of what we just have to start to talk about. Start to say it's okay. Things do fall apart. That's what life is as well. It's a good life lesson to try something, find that it doesn't work. Things happen to you in life, but actually you can get back up and do something different and get on with things. So I think generally, we just need a cultural shift away from this idea that just because such and such failed, that there's no point trying it at all. And it's hard. I mean, I agree. It's hard work.
I was going to say, how do you get from here to there? Because you're basically trying to change 150 years of cultural mindset in this country.
Well, I'll tell you, we start next week. We start doing different things. So, we've had a lot of teachers in the room and teaching professionals, so teacher trainers and things like that. A couple of them have heard the stories, and we've talked about what's going on around the world. And somebody said, what, I'm going to do that in my class next week. So we're going to start this process of just almost like, disseminating almost by stealth this idea that you can fail and it's okay, and it's going to start in a classroom in New York next week. The idea that it's okay to let students do this, even if it's not going to work, because they're going to learn something from analyzing why it didn't work. And they're going to talk to their colleagues, and their colleagues are going to start to do this. So, we're not talking about something that's going to happen in 2030, that suddenly kids are going to start experiencing failure. What we want to do is gradually shift the culture and shift the conversation as well. We have a big culture in the UK of talking about failing schools in the media, and what we want is schools to be allowed to innovate, allowed to try things. Teachers should be allowed to sort of see something and say, I think that might be a good thing that we try that, and if it doesn't work, then that's okay, because we'll not do it again, or we'll iterate, we'll change the way we do it. But to allow it to do it, and you can do it in a week. That's the amazing thing. If you get this right, you can try something. It fails. It fails. A teacher comes to you and says this fails. I'll say, why did it fail? Well, I think if I did this, it might work. Rather than just your teacher never trying anything because they're just too scared to come to you and say it might fail.
Gotcha. Okay, next excerpt from your communique. Bottom of page 6, please, Sheldon. Students connect with each other in fluid groupings that are dictated by their needs at any given moment. Often, these groups may combine students of different ages, different levels of attainment, and different interests. Graham, start us off on this. What's the thinking behind this observation?
Well, I think it's odd, isn't it? I mean, we seem to stream our children by age of manufacture. Rather than ability, and we all develop at different times, and so I think this is an approach of stage rather than age. And there are numbers of schools. I mean, this isn't a particularly new idea. This has been trialed in a number of schools, not like many ideas, but hasn't really been scaled. The idea that if you're already good at something, then you can take, if there's a test involved, you can take that now, or you can move to a group of older kids so that you're not being kept behind. And it's based around that, the idea that as we go into adult life, we learn things from people not based on their age, but based on their knowledge.
So do you want to restructure schools so that instead of, let's say, being automatically in grade 8 if you're 13, we shouldn't call it grade 8, we should call it grade Q.
It's a level within a particular discipline.
That could have 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, but they're all of relatively the same intelligence. Is that what you're looking at?
All the same ability. They have the same competence in that particular discipline. Remember, we're not necessarily talking about years on any of this. We're not talking necessarily about individual disciplines.
Okay.
So it's about where are you at this point? What can you do? I mean, take swimming classes, for example, with your children. There'll be no point in saying, right, you're only going to be in this class because you're 8 with all the ones that can't swim. I mean, if you can already swim the mile, then you'll be in with the bigger kids. It just makes sense to do that. And we don't apply that enough within the school system. And I think this is just recognizing that kids have different abilities at different times.
Jennifer, might make sense. Can it be done?
I think part of how we get from here to there is how we prepare and support teachers to be able to tailor the learning environment to students and to the learners where they're at. And obviously, technology can play a role in supporting some of that. And in some cases, a lot of things are happening, as you talked about the swimming example, a lot of extracurricular after-school activities, whether they be in a local community or online. So in a way, this is already an emerging method of learning where people cluster together based on common levels of an interest. And so how do we bring that kind of thinking in the classroom?
The funny thing is,
Please.
sorry. We all know this is the case. We all know that children progress at different rates. And yet we stick them in this system that just requires them to wait or requires them to move on when they're not ready. A couple of days ago, you had Lucy Hawking, who said that she learned to read at a really, really young age and started to absorb books. And her father, Stephen Hawking, actually only started to read when he was 8 or 9. He was actually a very slow developer when he was very young. And the idea that somehow you force these sort of strictures onto people where, if you're by age 5, you should be doing this. I mean, we all know it's not actually how it is.
Karash.
Yeah, I think one of the common ideas that we talk about is, what's our goal for education? Because, if we say, let's group based on intelligence, then people are going to, come and say, why intelligence? Why don't we go back to age? There's a certain social aspect to it. I, as a 20-year-old, can't relate to a 4-year-old if they were of the same mental capacity, you have to be careful with saying, or prioritizing intelligence over, social norms or intelligence over, culture, things like that. I do agree. I think in the moment right now, it's important for us to classify based on intelligence, if anything. So I would prioritize that.
But the priority at the moment seems to be chronology.
Yes,
which
and I think that should change.
May not make a lot of sense.
Well, but the communique, it's important to say, the communique doesn't say group kids by intelligence.
Exactly.
We're talking about the goal of education, we're trying to prepare kids for life. And in life, people aren't necessarily grouped by intelligence or age. So what this thing says, what our communique says is, have fluid groups of different kinds. So you might have one group that you're associated with in school that's because those are who you're comfortable with and you have friends. You have another group based on your ability, another group just based on interest. So what we're trying to get at is that these groups shouldn't necessarily be one specific thing, but there should be different kinds of groups that are more natural and organic within schools.
Gotcha. I read the communique pretty carefully. Still, I might have missed the word that I was looking for. Graham, the word internet does not appear in the communique. And so much of what we've been focused on this week suggests that the internet, of course, is and will revolutionize everything you've been discussing all week long. Why is the word internet not in your final communique?
Well, because we're talking about 2030. I mean, it's...
And it won't be around by 2030?
No, what I'm saying is that, we don't talk about water or pencils or in schools today. I mean, the internet is a communication medium. It transmits data, it connects us together and so forth. So to have a plan for education which is predicated by the technology, that would freeze it in time. I mean, if we came up with something and said, oh yes, the future is tablet computing, like so many people do, how ridiculous. By 2030, the tablet computer or the iPad will look like the Remington typewriter. I mean, it will just be an antique. So I think it would be very dangerous to tie it to technology platforms. Technology has been shifting in education since we used slates and slide rules and paper and so on, and it will continue to change. I mean, I do think, of course, the ability to communicate and send data around the world is very important. I think access to those things will be important, particularly in the developing world countries, because otherwise we face a particular situation where we have a digital divide that will divide populations of people like no other, those who have access and those who don't. But those are being addressed. I mean, consumer electronics technologies, for example, the mobile phone is a good example. I mean, today there are over 7 billion mobile connections in the world. I mean, there's only 7 billion people. So, that doesn't mean everyone's got one. Some people have two. But it's predicted that by even 2020, we'll have 25 billion mobile connections. This means that we're going to have multiple types of devices connected and across the entire world. I mean, the penetration of mobile devices in the developing world is very, very high. In some cases, higher than in the Western states.
Jennifer.
What it does emphasize, though, is that schools need to incorporate the available technologies in a creative way. And so that's where we need to systemically be able to adapt to whatever technologies are available in a creative way.
And be able to fail with them as well. So try something with a new
Yes, we know you're
technology.
big on failure. I know. We got the message about failure.
Technology is
It
just
just,
a tool.
there's so much about this week, and in particular about the building we're in, that's all about the internet. And I take your point, though, that it's a tool, and who knows in 13 years what the tools are going to be.
I mean, do you think we'll be talking about the internet in 2030? I hope not. Do you know what I mean? Or Facebook. I mean, it will be gone. I mean, will Google be around in by 2030? Probably not.
How about television? Tell me we'll still have television by 2030.
I mean, I think, but television, I mean, look, we're streaming live as well as broadcasting.
Right.
So, we're now accessing it. You look at the advent of devices like Netflix and so on. I mean, our habits are changing. When I was a child, I would find new music because of the radio. I'd stay up late at night when I was supposed to be asleep, listening to the radio. I don't know any kids now today that discover new music from the radio. Habits change. Television won't necessarily disappear. It will just meet its demands.
TVO will still be there.
Thank you. That's good to know.
TVO will
That's
be
good to
here.
know.
And I'm sure you'll be in a virtual form.
Yeah, you'll be.
I met him
We'll
the
all
other
be
day.
around.
What's that thing called? Robo-thespian. That's my replacement. I met him the other day. But it's not so... All right, let me take it back a step. Sam, it's not so much the internet and that word. The notion of having every single possible piece of information you want at your fingertips. That's still going to be the case, presumably, in the year 2030, however it is you get there. That's revolutionizing education today, right? How do you plan for that 13 years hence? Or, 17 years down the road?
Well, I think that's one thing we've been doing, so that's why we've been de-emphasizing information and facts, because we know that there will be a huge abundance of availability. We don't know exactly what format that will be in, but we know that people have access to that. How do we prepare for it? We start trying to design a school, as we've been doing, that is ready for that. But it's important also to recognize, really make clear that one of the unique things about this communique is it's the product of people. The people that came together to put this together are from 6 continents, every different background and perspective. So we're trying to make this document really global, and we don't know, not only do we know what's going to happen in 2030, but we don't know the different local contexts. But we do think that, that people will have access to information everywhere.
Correct.
Yeah, with technology, I think what you have to keep in perspective is that you don't want people to know that it's an extension of your mind. Because once you feel as though every fact is, at your fingertip, then you stop retaining anything and everything. That's what happens with technological integration in the classroom today. Where I think overall technology shouldn't be integrated in the classroom today if you don't change the elements around it. Because you cannot just isolate it. It's like saying, installing Windows 8 in a computer from 2002. It's going to operate at a very slow speed. A computer might crash. What you have to do is that you have to change the computer and change the infrastructure around it.
Graham.
I'm not sure I totally agree. I understand where you're coming from. I mean, there are some things that we do know about the future. I mean, indeed, the very building that we're sitting in is going to be driving part of that future. I mean, in terms of quantum computing, for example, and leads the world in quantum computer design. Now, when the quantum computer exists, it will have the processing power that's over 1,000 times of the human brain. And as we know, those costs reduce very, very fast. I mean, the smartphone that you have in your pocket is like a supercomputer from 15 years ago. So it's very entirely likely that by 2030, such a powerful device will be commonplace and affordable. You think about what you could do with that. I mean, in terms of either connecting it directly to the amygdala in your brain and having access to all that stuff. Now, that's not without getting into the social issues and the privacy issues and all that sort of stuff. It's one of those breakthroughs which changes everything. We don't necessarily think it's going to be bad, but it would certainly change how we educate, and we have to have a system flexible enough to deal with those kind of breakthroughs.
Jennifer.
Just going back to how do we prepare teachers to incorporate technology into the classroom. There have been instances where sometimes the focus is too much on the technology or it is too much on the internet, and we have to create that context. One of the projects we're working on, actually together with the Toronto District School Board, is a set of blended learning courses, both online and in person. So looking at the model of how professional development is delivered. And I think this kind of pilot, I know we're talking both 2030, but then how do we get there? And there are these types of approaches that I think will contribute to that.
Okay, let's do one more thing, 'cause we're down to about 5 minutes and change to go. Sheldon, I'm in the middle of page 7 here. We've got another one of your benchmark videos that we want to show a little snippet from, and then we'll come back and chat. Roll tape, please.
Simply being rich can put you a learning year ahead of students from average backgrounds. In fact, family income is the best predictor of children's success in school. But we know we don't have to continue along this road. 7% of 15-year-olds in OECD countries are unable to demonstrate basic reading skills. But measures put in place in Finland have brought this down to 1%. We need to adopt more such measures to learning. We know this is possible because in some regions it is already happening. In places such as China and Korea, some of the best performers can be found among the poorest students. In small pockets of success around the world, innovative approaches to learning are enabling disadvantaged students to succeed against all the odds.
Let's talk about a more equitable world finally. And in this respect, I think I saw the statistic there are 134 million kids who are going to be born this year, and 2/3 of them won't make it to high school. That's shocking if you think about the lost potential, the lives that could have been lived that won't be lived because all of those people will not be getting as much education as they could be. Michael, what about the ideas that you've been mulling all week long here could lead to a more equitable educational experience so that those kids aren't left by the side of the highway?
Yeah, it's been really important to us that we don't just sort of think about, kids from North America or kids from Western Europe. We have to look all over the world and see what's going on and see where the holes are in the provision. And sometimes it's that governments don't have enough money to put schools in place. Sometimes they don't have enough money to pay teachers. And there are various sort of problems with nutrition. So if you come from a poor area, you go to school hungry, actually your brain isn't working in the same way, and it's not working as well as it could be. So there are all kinds of issues we need to address. But everything that we've looked at, we've provided ideas on teaching and examples. But what we haven't done is kind of say, right, in Brazil they should do this, in Uganda they should do this. We've just talked about how kids learn, how they're best, how you help that to happen as best possible. And people will work these things out in local contexts. But it doesn't require necessarily good resources. It just requires good thinking about your resources.
Sam?
Yeah, and I think one of the really exciting things about this is some of the new fancy ideas for how to fix the education system have all these expensive equipment involved and all these complicated hierarchies and stuff. And actually a lot of the stuff we've put together really makes it easier to enact educational change, no matter where you are. So some of these instances in which we kind of blow up the traditional idea of the school with four walls and the teacher and and a lot of this new exciting sort of project-based learning and student leadership, I think what's been coming up is that this actually will create equity by making different kinds of education possible all over the globe. So I think that's exciting.
Jennifer, is it really possible, with the work you've done here and the principles you're espousing in the final communique, to change the fate of the 2/3 of those 134 million kids who today aren't going to make it to high school?
I think it really speaks to the point of personal responsibility and a collective responsibility, and that we all have a responsibility to create opportunities for children everywhere to gain access for a better world, and to have them know that there are people who believe in them, both within their communities, and we have to look in a globalized world. It is a huge threat to have a large portion of the population unable to access those opportunities.
Kourosh?
I think if I had an answer to that question, I'd be very famous. And I think part of the reason I say that is because that's a very all-encompassing question where it's not just education that you have to change to make sure that education becomes a priority in regions of the world. I think it's wrong to think that, quite frankly, if you can't, put food on the table, or, if you can't keep warm at night, education is not going to be a priority, and rightfully so. There's a primitive idea, there's a primitive idea that you got to pass that before you can go up the hierarchy, and so it's keeping that in mind, and that's very important. We got to move from our Western perspective on that.
Graham?
Yeah, to add on that, really, the Western perspective, I think we actually have to look at the real reason why there isn't education. It's strange that some of the countries with the most natural resources have the less money. And I think we have to answer, we have to think about that. And the other thing is if you think about, for example, the continent of Africa, the world debt, the debt they have to the World Bank is $250 billion, which is about a third of the U.S. annual defense budget. I mean, what if we were to wipe that debt out and turn that into learning credits? So rather than paying the money back to the West, they would invest in their own education infrastructure. Maybe that would be a solution. But we have to ask ourselves a long, hard question. Do we want to have educated populations within those countries? And I think that is a very strong political issue that our policymakers need to determine. Because if we don't do something, that's when you start getting extreme acts within the planet, because the lack of equity and the lack of sharing of natural resources.
But I'm inferring from your answer there that yes, we do see it as a priority, it just may not be our top priority.
No, I wouldn't. I'm sorry if I gave that inference.
Well, you seem to think defense spending is more urgent than education spending.
Well, I see what you mean. I thought you were talking about our forum. No, I think that we do as a planet. I mean, imagine if we spent our entire defense budgets, our national defense budgets, on education. Maybe then we wouldn't have to have a defense budget.
I just want to add, though,
you get the last word tonight.
I have a lot of young people in our network in Africa from Taking It Global that many diverse countries that are taking the access that they have with the education or the technology, and they're creating grassroots initiatives to provide education outreach for young orphans or doing peer-to-peer education. So there's the formal spending, and then there's the informal education that we also need to support.
Okay. Thank you all tonight for a great discussion, the 5th of our 5 programs that we've done here at the Perimeter Institute. You've been a great group of guests, and we thank you very much for helping us out with this evening.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.